When I woke up that morning, I wasn't in my own apartment anymore. I was in a Manhattan high-rise penthouse with a skyline view that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. Took me a minute to realize I wasn't me anymore, not exactly. I was in someone else's body, and not just anyone's. Ethan Price, a complete side character in a romance novel I'd once read. In the book, Ethan's only role was being the contracted husband of Lily Summers, the kind of New York heiress who could probably buy half the city without breaking a sweat. In the original plot, Lily was the biggest sucker alive, completely in love with the perfect male lead Ryan Carter, a guy the author painted as warm, reliable, and endlessly patient. In reality, he was the type who'd run to Lily every time his rebel sweetheart Samantha Reed got herself into trouble: street fights, shady deals gone wrong, business screw-ups, you name it. Lily would hand over money without blinking, Ryan would play the hero, and Samantha would rack up character growth points until she redeemed herself and turned into a powerhouse CEO. Then she'd repay Lily by stealing her company. The book ended with Ryan and Samantha living happily ever after with triplets, while Lily walked away broke and alone. And Ethan Price? He was just a footnote, the guy Lily married for 1 year so Ryan would stop suspecting she liked him. The contract ended, Ethan got his payout, and that was that. But now I was Ethan, and the contract was almost up. According to the plot, my job was to take the check, sign the divorce papers, and disappear from the story forever. Honestly, that was my plan, to no point getting tangled in whatever mess these people called romance. Except Lily changed. She stopped lending Ryan money. She ignored his calls. She started telling him things like, "Isn't it time you asked your own family for help," with this bored expression that could cut glass. And she didn't just change with him, she changed with me. The woman who was supposedly cold, distant, and untouchable suddenly started smiling at me. Teasing me. Acting like she actually cared what I thought. One day, I caught her flat out refusing Ryan's sob story about needing cash for some emergency. "You think every time you're broke you can come to me? What, you don't have family?" she'd said, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. I was standing in the hallway listening, caught between shock and something dangerously close to admiration. Then she turned, saw me, and instantly swapped her attack dog glare for a bright, puppy-like grin. "Honey," she said sweetly, "I just protected our joint assets all by myself. Aren't I amazing?" I had been holding the divorce agreement in my hand, ready to tell her it was time to wrap things up. But instead, I just said, "Amazing," because honestly, my brain short-circuited. In the book, Ethan didn't matter. He barely appeared for 3 chapters before vanishing from the plot. But now I was here, and Lily's new behavior was throwing everything off balance. I'd synced up with Ethan's memories when had been her junior in college, quietly in love with her for years. So when she asked him to be her contract husband, he'd agreed without hesitation, secretly hoping fake could turn real. Instead, he got a year of cold shoulders and watching her drop everything for another man. And now, just when the contract was about to end, she was acting like we were some happily married couple. I didn't buy it. Not completely. Maybe this was her way of keeping me around to avoid paying the settlement. Or maybe she was just bored. Whatever it was, I wasn't planning to get pulled into her games. That resolve lasted until one night, when I was about to pass out in my own bed and the door opened. Lily stood there in silk pajamas, hugging a small pillow like a kid who'd just had a nightmare. "I can't sleep," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Go run a couple laps outside then." She didn't even pause. "I don't want to run laps outside. I want to run laps in your heart." I stared at her, because what the hell was I supposed to do with that? She ignored my expression and climbed right into my bed. "You're not seriously," I started, but she whipped out our marriage certificate from her pocket, flashed it in front of my face, and said, "Legally married. Good night." Then she closed her eyes like the conversation was over. Somewhere between dealing with her antics and watching her slam the door on Ryan's desperate pleas, I realized Lily Summers was no longer playing by the book. And that meant neither could I. Because if Ryan was about to make his next big move, the one where he came begging for help to save his precious Samantha, I needed to be ready to burn the original script to the ground. The next time Ryan Carter showed up, it was exactly like I'd predicted, only worse, because this time he wasn't just dripping fake sincerity, he was practically crying as he tried to spin his story for Lily. I just walked out of my office when I heard his voice in the living room, the kind of pathetic tone that made me want to slam a door in his face. "This is different, Lily," he said, "Gabe's in trouble, real trouble. He got into a fight, and the other guy's threatening to put him in jail unless we pay up." I leaned against the wall, waiting to see how she'd play it. Lily didn't even flinch. "If Gabe ends up in a cell or the crematorium, that's still not my problem," she said flatly. Ryan's mouth fell open, but she cut him off before he could start whining again. "I'll lend you the money if you pay back the 20 grand you already owe me." The silence that followed was beautiful. When he finally found his voice, it was pure disbelief. "You're seriously asking me to pay back 20 grand? You have more money than you know what to do with." Lily's laugh was low and sharp. "And you've got a face thick enough to survive a hurricane. Should I test it with a couple slaps?" He shut his mouth so fast I thought he'd bitten his tongue. She was done entertaining him, so he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Then she turned and caught me watching. 1 second ago she'd been a Rottweiler, the next she was a golden retriever wagging her metaphorical tail. "Babe, I just saved our joint assets from a parasite. Tell me I'm awesome." I still had the divorce papers in my hand, but I just muttered, "Yeah, awesome," because I didn't trust my voice not to sound impressed. I'd been thinking for days that I needed to get out before she dragged me into whatever her game was, but after seeing her stare Ryan down like that, I couldn't tell if she was just protecting her money or if something else was going on. That night, she pushed it even further. I was dozing off when my bedroom door creaked open. There she was again, holding that same damn pillow. "I can't sleep," she whispered. "Then go run around the block," I said without opening my eyes. "I don't want to run around the block," she replied, voice sweet as sugar. "I want to run laps in your heart." I opened my eyes just in time to watch her climb into my bed. "Lily, we're legally married," she said, pulling the marriage certificate from her pajama pocket like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Good night, husband." And that was it. She curled up like she owned the place, and I was left wondering if she'd finally lost her mind. Over the next week, she started acting like we were a real couple. Morning texts. Random lunches. Even a midday photo of a latte with a heart in the foam captioned, "Thinking of you." I tried ignoring her, but it's hard to ignore a billionaire who decides you're her favorite new hobby. Then Ryan reappeared in my life in the worst way possible, my job. I walked into the newsroom one morning and there he was, standing beside my editor with that humble act plastered all over his face. "This is Ryan Carter, our new intern," my editor announced, and I had to bite back a laugh. In the book, this was where Lily had pulled strings to get him into the magazine so he could work his way up the industry ladder. Without her help, he'd have been stuck doing coffee runs forever. Now here he was, staring at me like he was sizing up a competition he didn't even know he'd already lost. He started small, playing the friendly guy with everyone, buying coffee for the team, running errands. And then he came to me. "Ethan," he said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "I wanted to apologize about the other day. I was stressed, me friend needed surgery, and Lily wanted to help, but you were upset. I shouldn't have put you in that position." I blinked. The man had just flipped the whole story. Now I was the jealous husband who stopped my wife from helping a poor friend in need. My co-worker's eyes turned sharp. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I smiled. "Oh, you mean your friend who got into a fight and put someone in the hospital?" The one who owes Lily 20 grand. Yeah, tragic. The room went quiet. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. I knew what was coming next because I remembered the plot. Our magazine was about to launch a new high-profile business interview section, and in the original story, Ryan had used his connection to Lily to score the first interview with her, launching his career. This time, I wasn't going to let it happen. At the meeting, my editor pitched the idea and asked for suggestions on the first subject. Ryan immediately raised his hand. How about Lily Summers? She's influential and respected, and I might be able to get her to agree. The editor looked interested, but I could see the doubt. Lily never did interviews. Still, Ryan's eyes slid to me like he was daring me to object. I just leaned back. If you can get it, fine. But if you can't, maybe you should be the one to leave. A few people gasped. Ryan's smile was tight. If I get it, do I get promoted? The editor laughed, but I didn't. Sure. And if you don't, you're gone. I knew the man couldn't pull it off, not this time. Because I had my own plan, and it didn't involve Lily. My target was Richard Coleman, an old-school business legend in Chicago who could make our magazine's name overnight. The problem was getting to him was notoriously private. That night, Lily asked why I didn't want to interview her. I told her I had someone else in mind, and for the first time in days, she went quiet. You could have just asked, she said, her voice cooler than usual. I didn't know it then, but that moment was going to change everything. And by everything, I meant the game between us, the one I hadn't even realized we'd been playing until I saw her reaction. Lily went radio silent after that conversation, which, considering her recent habit of texting me borderline ridiculous things like, just saw a dog that looks like you, in the middle of the workday, was unsettling, and I couldn't decide if I liked the piece or if I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but the next evening she was back at it, showing up at my bedroom door with that same pillow like she had a timeshare in my bed, only this time she didn't come in, just leaned against the doorframe and asked, so who's more important than me? And I told her about Richard Coleman, how landing an interview with him would put the magazine's new business section on the map, and instead of teasing me, she frowned like I'd just insulted her personally, muttered something about loyalty, and disappeared into her own room, and the next morning she was acting normal again, driving me to work and even bringing me coffee, but I could tell she was thinking about it. 2 days later she handed me a slim folder with Richard's name on the front and said, "This is everything I could find's hard to pin down, but I might be able to get you in a room with him, no promises," and I wasn't about to ask how she got the intel, just thanked her and tried not to react when she added, "By the way, that's not Ali also got you a seat at a dinner he's attending this weekend, but I can't take you myself. So give me your questions and I'll pass them along," which sounded like a gift from the gods considering Coleman's reputation for dodging media entirely, but that night I sat on my couch going through the folder and a name jumped out at me, Gabe Coleman, his grandson, and it took me a second to place it before I remembered. In the novel, Gabe was the guy Samantha Reed put in the hospital during one of her street fights, the same friend Ryan was trying to save with Lily's money. The incident that in the book was magically smoothed over by Lily behind the scenes so Samantha wouldn't get arrested, and that moment was the turning point where Samantha decided to change her life, and start a business, with Ryan by her side and Lily as the secret bank account funding it all. So if the timeline was the same, then right now Samantha was laying low and Ryan was scrambling to make it all disappear, which meant I had leverage, the kind you couldn't buy, so I scribbled an address and a note details on the fight, how Gabe was the victim, and my personal suggestion that Richard make sure the person responsible saw the inside of a courtroom, and slipped it on top of my interview prep before handing the whole thing to Lily, telling her, "Make sure he sees this first," and she didn't even ask what it was, just raised a brow and smirked like she decided to humor me. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number, and when I picked up, a deep voice said, "Mr. Price? This is Richard Coleman. We've apprehended the person who assaulted my grandson." "I'm curious, how did you know about this?" And I told him, "Just a journalist doing his homework," and he chuckled. "That's the kind of tenacity I respect. You have your interview," and just like that, I jumped a whole arc in the story, bypassed Ryan's golden boy moment, and landed the biggest exclusive of the year. When I walked into the newsroom the next day and told the editor, his face lit up like a kid at Christmas, and he couldn't resist a jab at Ryan, who'd been trying to call Lily non-stop and getting nowhere. See, Carter. That's how you hustle. And Ryan just sat there looking like he'd bitten into a lemon. I didn't rub it in, okay, maybe I did a little, but I didn't have to say much because the look on his face said it all. That night, Lily was waiting for me when I got home, leaning on the kitchen counter with 2 glasses of wine. So successful day, and I told her about Coleman calling me directly, how he'd appreciated my tenacity. And she laughed. You mean he appreciated my dinner invite? And I grinned. Team effort, but she didn't let me off that easy, stepping closer until I could smell her perfume. So when are you going to interview me? And I blinked. You don't even like doing interviews. And she shrugged. Maybe not, but if it's you, I might make an exception. And I didn't know if she was flirting or testing me or both. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a notification. Samantha Reed had just been sentenced to over a year in prison for assault, and I didn't need to be a genius to know who'd made sure it happened. I glanced at Lily, and she just smiled over the rim of her wine glass like she knew exactly what I was thinking, and maybe she did, because that night, for the first time since I landed in this story, I started to think about what it would be like if I didn't take the divorce money and run. But reality had a way of showing up fast, and in this case it showed up as Ryan, cornering me outside the building the next day to say, "Don't get too comfortable. Lily's always liked me, and the only reason she married you was to keep her feelings from being obvious." And I stared at him for a second before laughing. Wow, you really are allergic to shame, and walked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done, not by a long shot, and I was right. Because Ryan Carter wasn't the type to lose gracefully, was the type to burn the whole damn house down if it meant he could watch someone else choke on the smoke. Ryan didn't come at me right away, which almost made me think he'd decided to swallow his loss and move on, but that was wishful thinking and I should have known better, because a guy like him doesn't accept losing the spotlight. He waits for a crack to widen, and mine came a few weeks later when I noticed my mouse wasn't where I'd left it on my desk, small enough to shrug off at the time. But 2 days after that, the internet blew up with a headline that made me feel like I'd been shoved into a bad reality show. New York's golden heiress Lily Summers in a contract marriage with a gold-digging nobody, complete with my full name, work history, and the claim that I'd married her purely for her money and used her connections to score interviews with industry heavyweights. And just to drive the knife in, there was a screenshot of a text from my phone that read, "The contract's over, there's no property to fight about. Let's get the divorce over with," which, taken out of context, looked like a confession that our marriage was nothing more than a business deal, which, to be fair, it had been, but not the way they were framing it now, and I didn't need a detective to figure out who'd taken that from my computer before he quit. It was Ryan's parting gift, wrapped in spite and tied with envy, and the comment sections were a dumpster fire. So that's how this guy got close to all those CEOs. Poor Lily, duped by a con artist. No wonder he's been keeping a low profile. He's living off her money, the usual garbage people write when they think they've found a new villain to roast. And then Ryan himself fanned the flames by posting a video saying he'd been mistreated during his internship, forced to chase impossible assignments like getting an interview with my own wife, and that he'd been threatened with being fired if he failed. And because everyone loves an underdog, suddenly I was the toxic boss in a David versus Goliath story, except the David here was a smug manipulator who'd built his whole career off Lily's wallet, and the Goliath was me. Apparently, even people in the industry who should have known better were side-eyeing me, and my editor had no choice but to pull me off assignments until things cooled down, which pissed me off more than I wanted to admit. But when Lily saw the news, she wasn't angry at Mesh, was furious at him, muttering curses I didn't think she knew and saying, "I'm sending him a legal notice today," then looking me dead in the eye and adding, "And no, we're not divorcing, not now, not ever, so don't let this crap get to you." But I wasn't in a rush to shut it down, because the bigger the fire, the more satisfying the burn when it turned around. So instead I spent the next 3 days collecting everything I could on Ryan's security footage of him at my desk the day he quit, bank records showing Lily had lent him money he never repaid, screenshots of him begging her to take him back, even one where he said he regretted rejecting her years ago, and then I put it all in a neat package, uploaded it online with a statement that I reserved the right to sue him for invasion of privacy, defamation, and unpaid debts, and sat back to watch the reversal. Lily was the first to repost it with a caption that read, "Our marriage was my decision, and my promise to Ethan was that he had the right to love me or leave me. But he's earned his place beside me. He's educated, hardworking, and worth more than any rumor could touch," which was already enough to flip some opinions, but the real game changer was when Richard Coleman himself joined in, making a public account just to say, "When I agreed to my interview with Mr. Price, I had no idea he was connected to MS. Summers." What impressed me was his integrity and sharp perspective on the market, qualities that speak for themselves, and once he spoke, other executives I'd interviewed followed suit, posting their own support until the narrative shifted from "gold digger" to "professional who made it on merit," and Ryan's name became synonymous with "liar" and "deadbeat" in the same threads that had roasted me days earlier. People digging up old photos of him with Samantha and asking when he was going to pay back the 20 grand, others saying, "Guess being the golden boy doesn't pay the bills anymore," and by the time the dust settled, Ryan's chances of ever working in journalism again were gone. I still went ahead and sued him, because I believe in finishing what I start, and the court forced him to repay Lily and cover damages for the hit to my reputation, after which he vanished from the city's gossip cycle like he'd never existed. Life went back to normal, or at least, the new normal Lily had been building, which apparently involved finding new ways to surprise me every week, whether that was showing up at my office with lunch or announcing we were going to some gala because we need more pictures of us looking hot together, to flood the internet. And as much as I wanted to tell myself I was still just riding out the remnants of our contract, I knew the truth. Somewhere between her slamming the door in Ryan's face and her standing next to me while the world tried to tear me down, I'd stopped thinking about the divorce as an escape plan and started thinking about what it would mean to stay, which is probably why, when the next curveball hit, it didn't make me want to run, it made me want to fight alongside her, no matter how insane the game got. 2 years passed faster than I expected, and if someone had told me back when I first woke up in this body that I'd still be married to Lily Summers happily, no less I'd have laughed in their face. Yet here we were, planning a wedding that wasn't about contracts or appearances but about making it official for real. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still trying to process how we got from a 1-year business deal to her kissing me in the kitchen while complaining about the florist's attitude. The ceremony was everything Lily wanted, grand enough to make page 6 but still intimate enough that I recognized everyone in the room, and by the time we got back to the apartment that night, she was tipsy and sentimental, leaning against me and mumbling things like, "I knew from the moment you told Ryan off that you were the one, and, if I could go back, I'd marry you sooner," and I just listened. Because when Lily Summers decided to be vulnerable, you didn't interrupt, you memorized every word. A few days later, I was leaving a meeting downtown when I saw a man on the sidewalk who made me slow down, not because he looked familiar at first, but because the 3 toddlers clinging to him were all crying, one with a scraped knee, another with a runny nose, and the third trying to wriggle free. And then he turned his head, and I recognized Ryan Carter, though he was barely recognizable from the polished, smug guy I'd known. His clothes were worn, his hair unkempt, and the woman stomping toward him with a grocery bag in one hand and pure irritation in her voice could only be Samantha Reed, because she went straight into yelling, "I told you to keep an eye on them. Do you know how hard it is to find work when you've got 3 kids screaming at the interview? This is your fault." And Ryan snapped back, "My fault? When you found out you were having triplets, I said we couldn't afford it," I said, but Samantha cut him off with a string of curses. "Oh, so now it's about the money? You didn't mind taking money from Lily when it was for me, did you? You didn't mind living off her handouts while pretending you were some noble martyr," and he stepped closer, jaw tight. "Everything I did back then was for you," and she laughed like it was the stupidest thing she'd ever heard. "For me? Please. You just didn't have the guts to admit you liked the free ride. And now that no one's paying for your messes, you're blaming me." The kids were wailing, the 2 of them were practically nose to nose, and people were slowing down to watch, which is probably why I didn't notice Lily walking up beside me until she tugged on my sleeve and said, "What are we looking at?" I glanced at her, debated telling her, then decided against it. "Nothing worth your time," and she shrugged, holding up a bag with a fresh fish inside. "Good, because I've got dinner plans for us tonight. You're getting my upgraded water-boiled fish, and I want you to tell me if it beats the last version." And as she pulled me away from the scene, I caught one last glimpse of Ryan standing there with his hands in his hair, Samantha shouting at him while their kids clung to their legs, and it hit me just how far the roles had flipped 2 years ago. They were the author's golden couple and I was background filler, but now I was the one walking away with the woman who'd once been written to lose everything, and she was smiling at me like I'd given her the world. Back at the apartment, she busied herself in the kitchen while I set the table, and when she finally brought over the dish, insisting I try it immediately, I took a bite and told her it was perfect, and she grinned, good, because I plan to keep making it for the rest of our lives, and I couldn't help laughing. That's a long time to commit to one recipe, but the truth was, I wanted exactly that, this woman, this life, and the quiet certainty that no matter what kind of chaos the plot had in store when I landed here, we'd rewritten the ending together, and it was better than anything the original author could have imagined. It's strange how fast normal can settle in after years of chaos, like one day you're navigating landmines disguised as people and the next your biggest concern is whether your wife is going to ambush you at the office with homemade lunch again. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't secretly look forward to those interruptions, because Lily Summers had a way of making the ordinary feel like something worth remembering, whether it was her leaning against my desk to gossip about someone from a gala we'd attended or texting me at 2 p.m. with, thinking of you also, do you want steak or pasta tonight? We'd been married for years now, no contracts, no expiration dates, just us, and though the echoes of the old plotline still lingered in the city's gossip circuits, it was more like a faded rumor than an active threat, which is why it caught me off guard when, during a charity event one evening, an older reporter asked me quietly, do you ever think about how different things could have been if you'd just taken the money and walked? And I actually laughed, because if I'd walked away, I'd have missed all of this. Lily dragging me into her ridiculous schemes, us teaming up to crush people who thought they could use her, late nights in the kitchen when she insisted on improving the same recipe for the 10th time, the way she'd still lean into me at public events like she wanted the whole room to know I was hers, and yeah, the way I'd gotten used to being hers too. Later that night, back at our apartment, she kicked off her heels and flopped onto the couch with her phone, scrolling through something before tilting it toward me. Look at this, Ryan and Samantha are selling their story to some trashy reality show, and sure enough, the headline read, From Fortune to Food Stamps, The Carters Tell All, complete with a photo of the two of them looking like they'd aged 20 years, and I just shook my head. Guess they finally found an audience that wants to hear their version. And she smirked, too bad it's the kind of audience that also thinks wrestling is real, then tossed the phone aside and curled up next to me. You know, I'm glad you stayed. And I looked down at her, I'm glad you made me, because we both knew there'd been a point when I could have left, when walking away would have been the safer, easier choice, but instead we'd both doubled down, turned a fake marriage into something real, and built a life the original author never saw coming. She grinned. So you admit I was right, and I rolled my eyes. Don't get used to it, but she just laughed, the sound filling the room, and for a moment I thought about how far we'd come from her chasing after a man who didn't deserve her, to her standing beside me while the world tried to tear us down, to now, when we didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Outside, the city was loud and restless like always, but inside our little corner of it, things were quiet, steady, ours. And as she dozed off against my shoulder, I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking of myself as someone who'd stumbled into a story that wasn't mine and started thinking of it as exactly where I was supposed to be, because in the end, the real twist wasn't that I'd survived the plot, it was that I'd rewritten it, and Lily Summers had been the co-author all along.